Welcome. This panel is called Fact-Checking Connection. And what this is about is we're looking at the ways fact checkers have been able to reach out and to engage with our audience. Thank you for joining us on this second panel here on International Fact-Checking Day. We're putting on here at the IFCN. Joining us today, we've got three wonderful panelists joining us today who are all engaged in some very interesting projects. I'm going to introduce them now. First we got Venu Arora, who is the co-founder and the executive director of the Ideosync Media Combine. Venu, welcome. Awesome.
Hi. Good to be here.
Hi. Glad to have you. Thank you for joining us all the way from India. Next, we've got Fabiola Torres, who is the director of Salud con Lupa in Peru. Fabiola, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. And last but not least, we have Alexa Volland, who is the editor of the Teen Fact-Checking Network at MediaWise. So Alexa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we've got about 25 people joining us. Okay, so let's launch into the webinar. So we're going to be talking about some of the ways your projects have connected with people, some of the things you've learned. Venu, I'm going to start with you. One of the things that you've done at Ideosync Media is you've done these media literacy trainings where you've gone out into parts of rural India and you've trained women in fact-checking and media literacy. And I'm wondering, what are some of the things you've learned, some of the lessons that you learned going out and connecting with those communities about the way you did your fact-checking and the way you needed to communicate with them in order for them to really understand some of the concepts that you were trying to teach them?
Right. So Harrison, there are two, actually, just want to make a correction there. So we work in urban marginalized communities with women and girls on media and information literacy. So these are in urban areas, but still they're quite marginalized. So there are, urban settlements around, say, the capital city of Delhi, and access to the internet is limited, but it's still there. And of course, women are at the margins of all this digital consumption and therefore need far more handholding to become fully literate. And the second part of the work that we do on media literacy was with community radios who are more in the rural areas. And there we work with the local community reporters. So we did trainings with both these communities. And I would say that the two kinds of challenges that we face. One is that fact-checking is only a part of media literacy, and media literacy is so much wider. So it's very easy for people to understand, especially the community reporters, to understand the need for fact-checking and the purpose for fact-checking. But the larger, more complex world of data, privacy, surveillance, all the many issues that we have in mail that are very, very important for us as citizens as we go forward. Those need to be unpacked, layer by layer, and require a lot of understanding, especially with, when we have WhatsApp becoming the central mechanism by which a lot of sharing happens. So it's important, and we use WhatsApp to also train, so it's very, very interesting, this whole universe that we are working with the communities. And with women and girls in the slum areas, I think the thing to understand is that many of them are first-time digital users as well in their families. They're probably picking up the smartphone for the first time. So as they are becoming, I would say digital citizens, it becomes even more important for them to understand and unpack the media that they're consuming. And so very often in our training, you had to teach the digital device and then move from there to teaching media literacy, right? And how you create media, how news organizations create media, how you can create your own media, and all the rules and regulations around journalism. So we're doing many things in one go. We are doing citizen journalism training, we are doing mail, we are doing fact checking, because essentially we are taking somebody who's a first-time digital user from being right here to becoming an active citizen online. So I think that's a lot to do. And it's iterative. Our training process is iterative, and we've been learning as we've gone along.
What are some of the, because you're talking about teaching them, you got to teach them these devices. You have to get them up to speed in terms of how these devices work before you launch into the media literacy. What are some of the important lessons that you've learned when you've gone doing that teaching? Some of the things that you think are important that you didn't know going in, and then it was like, oh, okay, we need to do this.
So there's a lot of language translation work that's required. So there's, for example, we're looking at, don't mindlessly just say okay to everything, right? So one is, of course, training them to know what is okay, what are they saying okay to, and then, in a country like India that is so many different languages, even if you're working in only the two, English and Hindi, there are so many dialects and languages in which all this media material is not available. The privacy settings, all the stuff that is online, companies are not putting it out except in English. So that brings a lot of labor on small organization like ours, and I can see my co-panelists nodding, in translating all this material, the terms of use, and that we are signing up to as citizens. All of that needs to be translated. So we actually have, we read it out, translate, because a lot of it is not available in local languages. So, it's almost happening, it's oral mill in many ways, right? It's all oral mill. So we're going back to our oral histories, as you might call it. So it's a combination of the traditional and the new media. And then, of course, we are having to, so in our training center, we have these charts where you've got the icons noted down as to what icon does what on the digital device, of course. So we are, like I said, we're just, we've just about scratched the surface at the moment.
You're talking about translations in terms of languages. Sometimes even when you're native in that language, you need to have it translated because the privacy rules or sometimes the terms and conditions are a little bit difficult. So how do you navigate that challenge in some of the language, like when you're translating into these other languages? How do you explain it to other people for whom it's not in their native language?
Yeah, so we have to take a call. So we're not translating all of it. We're translating the top 3 things that you should know. Yeah, and it is being done, like I said, orally. We haven't yet, so we have it in English and Hindi, but we haven't yet managed to, India has 22 languages, and we are working with our community reporters. We have a network of 60 radio stations. The first time round, we trained community reporters. We had about 100 plus community reporters who were trained in fact checking as well as in media literacy. So we haven't gone ahead and translated in all the languages, but we've done some translations in a couple. And that has helped.
But are there concepts that sometimes are difficult to translate?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So now that you talk about concepts, so we've tried something new. We've got a mill, what I call the Space Odyssey. It's a fictional drama set in space, which is looking at unpacking concepts around media literacy that are linked to democracy and citizenship in our world today. And because a lot of the current situation, not just in India, but globally, is so politically charged, a lot of the misinformation is in fact coming from local politicians, etc. So we decided to actually take all of this away from the immediate, so that we could discuss the concepts of how media may get kind of appropriated by large corporations, and then so all of that is playing out in space. So it's allegorical, it's metaphorical, and right now, so that's a 20-part, and it's on radio. So it's an audio, and we also have it on podcast. Currently, we have it in the Indian languages, but we hope in the next iteration, we will have it in English so that, other partners can maybe look at how they could adapt it, use it or whatever. But I'm quite excited by that Space Odyssey project, because it is taking the key concepts and kind of removing them from the immediate anxieties, so to speak. And we found that they work very well with young people. This drama has worked well with young people because they are then connecting and saying, oh, this is like, so we have Silica 3 and they say, oh, that is like the internet. And we have SS3 and they say, that's like social media, right? And so you've got, they're connecting the concepts and they're talking about, what's happening in that Space Odyssey drama with what's happening around them, and it's creating some kind of debate that is pushing people to kind of unpack the concepts. I'm excited about that bit of our program.
That's interesting. So you're taking it out of the politically emotionally charged realm, and you're refocusing it back on the concepts, and it's been effective.
Yes, so we will learn more. It's a 20-part series. We are right now broadcasting episode 11. And initially the first 2 episodes, the feedback we got, we don't understand anything. That's the feedback we got. And we were like, in my organization, we were saying, oh my God, this is going to be an absolute failure. Like nobody's understanding anything. But by the time we've reached episode 9, a lot of that feedback has changed. And so we are hoping that by the time we get to our 20th episode, we will be able to have some very meaningful conversations, and simultaneously there's fact checking happening, right? So so it's a multi-pronged approach, and
nice.
Let's see how it goes.
Let's see how it goes. I'll be interested to see how it goes and see how that develops as you guys go along in the episodes. Fabiola, I wanted to ask you. So you guys at Salud con Lupa, you put out a little graphic explaining all of the various treatments for COVID-19, proposed treatments, things that have some scientific research behind them that show that they're promising, things that have scientific research that show that they're not valid at all, and things that have been proven to be scientifically to be effective. Can you tell me how that project came about and what you were trying to accomplish with it?
Yes, of course. I will share the link with the audience here. You can follow the conversation if you want to navigate something about it. This is a project in partnership with a scientific partner. We work with Epistemonical Foundation, and it was an important alliance at the beginning of the pandemic. Why? Because most of the evidence available is in many parts of the world, and we need to select in the best time we have to organize information and explain the public. What happened? We at the beginning we just published fact-checking articles and explainers, and we noticed that it wasn't enough because evidence is faster and faster published, and we can't translate and also explain all the time. That's why we create this project. And we think that people is looking for treatments. We notice that many of them look at for dexamethasone, tocilizumab, the names that are strange for us, but many people know it because of their experience with the COVID. We noticed that many people find our site, our platform, looking for this. And we say, okay, there is a very important audience that is looking for it all time. And it means that they need to know the most updated information and evidence. And it's impossible to have many articles published every day or each week. And we decided to do like a special report with cards with information that is organized in 7 classifications. And we decided it with our partners. They are expert in evidence-based medicine, and that's helped us to organize the information depends on the quality of the evidence. This is a complex work, but intern, because we publish in an easy way to understand what you need to know about dexamethasone now, because each week we update the information. It's weekly. Every Friday you have the information on the website. Now we have 3 languages: Portuguese, English, and Spanish. We publish the information and we explain you what we review. Maybe 5 sales, clinical trials, and we resume the most important thing you have to know if the evidence change. It means that we work all week trying to organize information, but it's validated with our partners. They have an advantage because they have a platform with all the reports, science reports in the world, and they have all of this ready to analyze. And this is something that we are very happy and to have this alliance, because it's impossible now in this moment. You have more than 6,000 of preprints or many information you have on the media. You don't know what is the origin of the source. And in this case, we have all organized it. Other thing is that we know our audience profiling. Most of them are people who is very interested, or maybe we are like a reference for them to look at for treatments. Some of them confuse and think that we are doctors, but we are not. We don't give you advices. We just publish information, and also we say this is updated until that date. And we also say why is proven in the world this hydroxychloroquine or other treatment, but we say why they are using it or not. And in our classification, we also separate why is unsupported by science. For example, I don't know, the óxido de cloro in Spanish is very popular, unfortunately. Also, ivermectin. Ivermectin is like a fight with doctors and others, and we say neutral. This now, if you review our special report, you will notice that it's neutral because the evidence is limited. We try to be very equilibrated. I don't know why to say this, because most of scientists or doctors or researchers try to give us information, but we explain, okay, our methodology is to classify the information and the sources in this way. And that's why we have ready to be abandoned, unpromising, neutral, or ready to use, ready for use. I want to say that our partner is a very important organization in Chile. We are Peruvians and they are Chilean, and we work together to amplify the evidence in the world, because they are scientifics, and before the pandemic, they just talk with scientifics, and now they are talking with many people and trying to help journalists to understand and also explain the best way the information we have until now. Yes, this is the work, and we are a group of 5 people working each week to update the information.
Do you think, so you talked about trying to stay neutral because there's these, specifically ivermectin. I know when I look at the coronavirus facts database, Ferdy and I update that every week, and we see these fact checks coming in about ivermectin. So we know, it does seem like there's a lot of controversy around that. Do you find that explaining it in this way, in this neutral way, brings the temperature down a little bit around some of these discussions?
Yeah, something that is a challenge since the pandemic begins is that we don't have all the answers, and also the evidence have a faster evolution. But until now, we don't have all the evidence that you can have an answer that is very categorized, that you say this is true or false. It doesn't work like this in science all the time. But in ivermectin, we expose, for example, that there is a lot of clinical trials in many parts of the world, but not all of them are quality in the way they are proving the medicine. This is the challenge that we have to explain people, because most of them, there is a print, there is here, oh my God. Every day they have information, they say, this is the proof. You are not giving us all the information you have, not something like this. But this is psychology of the fact checking also. We say, okay, when we use humor, irony, explainers to explain people, okay, I know you have a preprint and this is for you, something that you can trust. But okay, let me say that science works in this way. And we are trying to select the information that is with standards. And that's the reason we explain people. We didn't classify the ivermectin ready to be abandoned, for example. This week was very important because WHO say an advice not use anymore ivermectin, especially in Latin America, because most countries use it. And this is very important because, for example, in my country, the Minister of Health said, okay, not more ivermectin in the clinical treatments we have. But people say, but we have other studies. In many people try to contradict this. But in this way, we work. This is our time. It's scientifically proven. Offer you all you think is evidence, but you don't know the quality, because it's not the same to expose observational document that a clinical trial with pairs of people and many faces you did to prove something. It's complex sometimes to explain, but we know, and this pandemic shows it, that people needs to understand. Most of the time they look up for information. That's why they find our site. We are a small newsroom with big impact, we say, because we have good partnerships, and also we have other media that amplify our information. We are part of the Alliance Latam Chequea, and most of them use the evidence to write fact-checking notes, or maybe last year it was a big experience, and we want to continue it because we use our evidence to expose it in cartoons or comics with El Surtidor from Paraguay, because they are illustrators. They explain with pop images something that we explained in the data or the articles. And they show people something that is related to you and something that you didn't understand well, but they use the language of the image, and also they use sometimes humor, because in this time you have many fights on the internet, and sometimes it's better to have some sense of humor to explain something. That's some things that we understand or we learn this pandemic time.
Got it. I'm gonna segue over to Alexa to talk to her about the Teen Fact Checking Network, because some of the work that you guys do and some of the ways that you present your fact checks, it does seem to use sort of that poppy humor and things that connect with teens. And I'm wondering, through your work with the TFCN, what are some of the things that you've learned about communicating fact checks with the teenage audience that you think you didn't know before you went in?
It's a great question. I think the biggest thing that we learned is that our fact checks resonate most when they are content that is created specific for the platform that they live on. Our focus is we really want to reach Generation Z. We want to reach teenagers. So we want our fact checks to be for teens by teens. And like Fabiola said, humor is a really great way to make a topic that is scary feel very neutral and approachable. And that is definitely one way that we try to teach fact checking and media literacy to teenagers. But I would say the biggest thing that we've learned is that these fact checks need to feel native to the platforms. Our audience is on social media. So MediaWise does not have a traditional website. All of our fact checks live on Instagram. They live in the form of TikToks, Twitter threads, Instagram stories, and now our new YouTube series called Is This Legit? And sometimes that does mean having a little fun. TikTok and YouTube are extremely humor, entertainment driven platforms. So we want our fact checks to be in that kind of same vein. So having a mix of content, some of which is playful and youthful, really resonates with our audience. Not every fact check can have a punchline in it, but I think having that mix of content and saying like, hey, we are in these spaces too, has been really great for us. But yeah, creating content that is specifically formatted for the platforms where our audience spends time.
Got it. That makes sense. I got a question here from the audience from Alan Leonard, and he is asking us, how do any of you measure the impact or effectiveness of your engagement? Do you guys have any ways that you measure it, and how do you judge that?
At MediaWise,
please carry on, Alexa. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. At MediaWise, for our fact checks live across a bunch of different platforms, but on Instagram, using the Instagram story feature, after every fact check, we use the poll button on Instagram, and that has been a great way for us to gauge, like, okay, is this fact check resonating with our audience? Did you like it? But after each fact check, we say, are you more likely to fact check on your own after watching this fact check? And since we've started polling our audience, more than 80% have said yes. So using these kind of features that are native within the platforms themselves has been a really great way to kind of gauge if our content is resonating with people.
Got it. And Venu, you wanted to jump in there as well?
Yeah, just to say that our fact check is going as an audio fact check on community radios. And so we're looking at the calls that the radio station get because it's interactive. So we're looking at the content of the calls, what are the listeners of these remote radio stations telling them about what they've learned and how useful these fact checks are. So we are collating that information. Plus, we've also done pre and post of our mill training. All our mill trainings, we've kind of looked at before the training, after the training, what do our reporters know and are able to do on their own, including fact checking skills. But we've also done that, 3 months after the training. So, not just pre and post, but looked at how much retention there is of that training on mill as well. So both in terms of fact checks from the listeners of the radio stations, as well as the reporter's own efficacy is being measured through this kind of continuous process. And because my organization also does a lot of participatory evaluation work, we have included what I call digital ethnography as part of our project. So we hope that by the end of the work, end of the year, we will collate a lot of the qualitative data that will give us, what I was talking earlier about, the learnings on how do we need to keep doing this work better.
Yeah.
Something that I can say is when we update our information in scientifically proven, some of the media amplify or take the information to do other articles and republish it. In Mexico, for example, when many people was like a fever of dióxido de cloro, they find our website, and also some digital medias call us to explain the project and also to use the information to spread to their audience. There is a lot of information that we know that is useful for journalists, for fact checkers, and there is a lot of information that is useful for users or audience that is looking for in this moment something that they need to be sure that it's accurate information or something that they need to be well explained. And that's why we notice when they find our news or our fact checks on the website. And also some radio stations call us to explain the information updated weekly, because until now in Spanish, there's a few media that have all week updated information. They are talking about the evidence and treatments. Now we are working on the vaccines evidence. It's difficult because are in the process, but I think that something that we use is also to amplify the work of other fact checkers. And this is a big impact now because everybody is looking for good information, and we have to go viral. And in the way to go viral, we need other partnerships. Scientific, for example, other disciplines. We love the work of people who have the ability to translate it on cartoons, or maybe to use the Instagram TV to explain our fact checks. And sometimes we are surprised because we didn't do it. It was a good idea. This Instagrammer uses our information to create and produce this. We are very proud that others use our information and transform it in many formats. This is a big impact for us.
How does that, one thing I'm curious, and so you have these ways of Alexa mentioned you have the surveys, and Venu, you mentioned some of the ways that you measure impact and engagement and things like that. How when you guys get these measures back in, how does that impact the way you do your work going forward? What does anything change? Like, how do you factor that into your fact checking work? Yeah, anyone who feels brave enough to answer the question.
Well, I think we have to listen to our audience if we want to continue to create content for them. So for example, on YouTube has incredible analytics that you can look at to see, where's the drop off, how long is the viewer duration for? And YouTube is a new platform for us. We've just begun kind of creating content specific for that platform. So we had a big learning curve to make sure that the content that we were making was effective. So sometimes we would hold the rating for the end, or sometimes we would put the rating up front and say, oh, by the way, this is false and here's how. And once we got to the rating, we had an incredible drop off. People got the answer that they were looking for. So I think it affected, looking at the analytics affected how we approached our script writing process for our video fact checks. And that's something that we took in consideration because we want people to stay engaged the entire length of time. When we were looking at our Instagram stories, we could see how many people are watching from the very beginning to the very end. And the more interactive features we had kind of sprinkled throughout, if we had the emoji slider feature, or if we had a question box, a poll, those things sprinkled throughout the entire story kept people engaged because we realized that they want to participate with us. So I'm not sure if, for us, the polls have been very positive. So it's not necessarily dictated, that impact has, or that metric hasn't really shaped how we approach fact checking, but looking at other analytics within the platforms has definitely affected how we approach fact checking.
So I'd just like to add that a lot of the fact-checking work that we are doing is very hyperlocal. And in fact, if we look at the metrics of all the information, so the way our project works is that our community reporters actually approach us with information that is going viral or is circulating that they feel is either misinformation, disinformation, and requires to be fact-checked. And we get that specifically because it's all hyperlocal, and it is not there on the national kind of viral digital spectrum either. So the mainstream fact checkers, the big fact checkers in India, for example, who are doing the national political fact checking are not doing that kind of hyperlocal content fact check. So that's a big learning for us that, you know, fishermen in coastal regions in Kerala, there was information that was circulating about their local loans being waived off, and that was not true, and that never made it anywhere nationally. Or tribal communities, you know, were talking about some land going to be occupied by some big industrialists, which is again you know, misinformation. So these are things that are very, very hyperlocal and meaningful to those audiences specifically. And I think and I'm sure that's the case for many communities internationally. And I don't think we have found a good enough solution. So we are still thinking about how this aspect of the hyperlocal can be made bigger. Like, I know that this is very niche right now, but it is very meaningful for those audiences, right? And we've been able to see that over 45% of our fact checks are new. They've not been fact checked by anybody else. So, you know, they're really kind of responding to the local needs. And if we get sucked into this big, broad, you know, all English kind of fact checking that is happening, we will end up marginalizing and actually creating communities that have a lot of misinformation circulating amongst them.
So do you find with when you're doing the hyperlocal work, do you find that concentrating on that, concentrating on the hyperlocal work, it helps, number one, stamp out misinformation, but also, do you think it engenders good feeling towards fact checkers and towards the work you do because you're so invested in these hyperlocal
so we are at a second tier, actually. The work is being done by our local community radio partners. So yes, definitely the radio stations themselves have gained credibility within their communities, because now they run this regular weekly fact check podcast, and they've all come up with their own names for their podcast. So we've tried to make it so it's not centralized. It's you know, they have their own name for their fact check bulletin, which is in their regional language. So it's actually building training capacity, their own capacity to fact check, so that hopefully at some point Ideosync is not required to do it for them, like they're doing it on their own, right?
Got it. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Fabiola, we have a question for you in the Q&A section here from Pedro Prada. The question is, what are the aspects you turn to in order to classify a scientific study for your audience? So how do you evaluate when you're trying to put that in your evaluate that for your audience? What are the things that you look at?
The aspect of the classification of the scientifically proven?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. These classifications were defined with the quality of the reports of the studies, the clinical studies. It means that which is the quality of the information, because I think that before the pandemic, journalists considerate or evaluate in the same way a study that it was not like with the standards, just say a report with some descriptions and everything, but you say this is a scientific source, and this other have a lot of indicators that have more qualify or quality of standards quality. We try to show people, okay, we have many clinical trials in the world, but not all are the same. And in the way we classified and put this week that categorize of is ready for use or neutral, it depends of this. It's very important, the source. We understand it before working with our partnership, because they use these standards for all the information they review. When we explain the sources to our public, we try to say it. And there is also, I published some of this, this is like a card in our website, and we say, this is the source, these are the sources, and you can find it. Why is the quality of the information? The common answer is, what does the evidence say? What does the evidence say? We explain, okay, this is, we know from these studies, but we have to explain you that it's very limited. These are not completed, it's poor information that you can consider that is a source, but it's not enough. This is something that we try to do our readiness score. We have this score each week, and each week also change. Some treatments that are on the neutral goes to ready to abandon. Sometimes happen it. Well, this is something that we understand working with a scientific partner, because before we try to explain all the sources, but we don't have to evaluate in the same way all of this. This is not correct in the scientific community, and also in the way we have the information. This is something that I can, we hope. We also have a lot of information to say, this is all the evidence that is available until now. We try to explain the public what we have there every week. We know that maybe in Spanish, the Spanish audience have less opportunities to confront the information, because most of the information is in English, and not everybody have the connection, or also the opportunity to review this. And another plus is that we translated it. I wanted to say something about explainers, because it was impossible in the pandemic to say false or true all the week, and people is waiting for this, true, false. But we have to say, we explain you. You don't know about it, but we explain you. We try that people understand how science works, because this is the problem until now. They want certain, and not all the way we have these answers. And we have to recognize that we don't have all weeks the answers. Maybe the next week we'll have more evidence, and we'll say, okay, we have now something that is categorizing. This is false or true, but you have to wait for it. And when you wait, you have to learn how the science works. And this is our mission. Salud con Lupa tries to fact check and explain the science and the health topics. And this is not like an affirmation or declaration of someone. This is more. It's for people that are very curious, but we think most of us are curious now in the pandemic, because it depends our life now.
Makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. No, because a lot of times when we're fact checking something, the most common answer is it's somewhere in between. It's not true or false. There's a lot of things that are gray, especially with scientific answers, where sometimes it's ironic how much sometimes science is more art than science in terms of trying to figure things out. We got a question here for Alexa. How did the teenagers that you find, how did they adjust to explain fact checks on video. So wait, I'm sorry, hold on. Just let me read this here, make sure I understand what the question is asking. Teens, how did they find them and how did they adjust? So how did you, first off, how did you select the teenagers for your YouTube series? How did you select those teenagers? And how did they, when they were going on video, how did they find, how did they adjust to learning how to explain these things on video?
Right. So luckily we had a few of our teen fact checkers that were already on staff doing our Instagram story fact checks that were interested in the YouTube side. So we had a few fact checkers that were already pretty comfortable on camera. We did pretty heavily advertise that applications were being opened across our social media channels, and we received more than 100 applications from teenagers all across the country that were interested in this YouTube project. And we were looking for teens to be on-camera fact checkers as well as off-camera fact checkers and researchers, because we understand that not all teens are mini baby influencers that are comfortable on camera. In the application process, they did have to submit kind of a video audition. We supplied them with a script of a fact check that we had done previously. And from there, it was pretty much splitting hairs, because obviously I would love to have this incredibly large, vast network of teens, but we did have to scale it back specific for this project. So right now we have a dozen teenagers, and again, they are spread across the United States, some of which were teens that had been with us for several rounds of the Teen Fact Checking Network. As far as getting them acclimated to being on camera, we do have a pretty extensive onboarding process. We knew that some of the kids were already kind of comfortable on camera based on their audition that they had submitted. But really it comes in the scripting process, I would say, making sure that the scripts are as conversational as possible, because that translates to them sounding conversational on camera. We did have a kind of on-camera training. We also send them kind of a filming kit that includes a ring light, a microphone, a tripod. And there were plenty of instances where they submitted their video fact check, and we had to give them a bunch of critiques and feedback and have them film again. And that's just kind of the nature of working with teenagers. Sometimes it happens. And it's also just really amazing to see their progression. I have one fact checker that you watch his first fact check compared to his fourth or fifth, and the confidence is just skyrocketed through the roof. So I think it takes practice, but I would say it really comes down to having the scripts be very airtight. And I think having a script that the kid feels confident with will translate on camera.
Got it. I have a question here for you, Alexa, from Ellen from Verifiles. She wants to know roughly how long are the YouTube fact check videos you guys do?
They range. They're usually about 4.5 to 6 minutes usually. And our fact check, MediaWise is a hybrid program in that we are part media literacy, part fact checking. So a lot of the teens use this fact check to teach their peers media literacy skills. So while the fact check itself might be pretty easy to debunk, a lot of the time is spent on showing the process, being very transparent, showing the keyword search, showing how they did the reverse image search. So a lot of the time in the video is just focused on kind of teaching these media literacy skills and using that to kind of spread media literacy awareness as well.
Got it. One thing I've heard you talk about before is some of the teens who come through the Teen Fact Checking Network. They, whether they be on Instagram, I don't know if the same thing happens on YouTube, but they really like the fact that, hey, I'm on camera, hey, I'm on Instagram, I get to show this off to my friends. Do you find that sort of helps evangelize the message a little bit more, because there's sort of this like, oh my God, my friend was, and they did all this cool stuff, like I want to be cool too.
Yeah, I think the word cool is the perfect way to describe the Teen Fact Checking Network, because it has to be cool, it has to be entertaining. And I think seeing having our audience see their peers do the fact checking, I think it also shows that anyone can vet information online. It just comes down to being skeptical and taking the time to, maybe do a quick little keyword search. We've had plenty of there was one commenter that stood out to me that was like, wow, like this girl is only 17 years old and she's like teaching, like, how do I get involved? So our audience is definitely recognizing that these are teenagers that are driven and motivated. And I think having these really kind of confident teens teaching media literacy and trying to speak directly to their peers has the fact checks resonate even further. And I think having this style of being for teens by teens is really working for us.
Makes sense. Venu, I'll get a question for you from Pedro Prada. He asks, can you explain how you monitor social media in a geographically targeted way?
So yeah, I saw that question. Thanks, Pedro, for the question. So we are not monitoring social media in the sense that, like I said, we are working through a network of community radio reporters who are native local language speakers. So they're the ones who pick up something because they've gone through the training. They're the ones who pick up something that may be circulating in their local social media or their network, whether it is through, Facebook, Insta, WhatsApp groups, and they then connect. If they are unable to kind of fact check it on their own and they don't find adequate resources, they will connect with us and work with our fact checker to kind of locate where, how to debunk it. So it's a fairly long process, and like they have to work together, the locally native, and then we also have some language translators at our end as well, who we call on to support the process. So yes, language is a big, it's a big issue. But the way we're working is it in partnership, and the primary person in the local area is the community reporter, who is a native local language speaker. And they're the ones who then kind of pick up if there's something that requires to be looked at and then discussed on their radio station.
Do you ever have instances where, because I know you're doing this hyperlocal stuff in these communities with these community radio stations, but do you ever have instances where you'll see a falsehood that might seem hyperlocal to one community, but it'll pop up in other communities?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it has happened. If I can look at our data, I think at least 5 or 6 times where it has been in circulation and in a different language. So the same information, slightly tweaked, has been made available in different languages. Yeah, absolutely.
So and having that having those hyperlocal partners, do you think that's an effective way? I mean, effective way to get at it in these communities that might not be reached at by some of the more mainstream outlets in India?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have to have more people trained in all the local languages and dialects. That's one, definitely. So having this and building those networks is very key. In fact, one of the demands that we are getting now from our community radio station partners is that, can we expand it to some local, like Alexa is saying, some local youth who are very, very keen to do this debunking work and do the kind of mill training with their peers. So because they are listening to the radio station, they're enjoying these podcasts, they're calling in to report, this is circulating in my family circle, can you look at it, things like that. So that's one of the demands that's coming, that, can you extend the training, because the reporters are still not feeling confident yet to do the trainings on their own. So they're saying, could we do a second round of training with some identified, selected community members, maybe youths who want to kind of take this forward.
That makes sense. You mentioned family, so I want to transition into this question here from Gabrielle Settles at PolitiFact. She asks, do you have any tips on to how to kindly engage your friends and family on social media who have been affected by misinformation? Has anyone had to deal with this? Seen members of your family who are spreading misinformation, and had any tips about how you do engage with them?
I think from fact checkers, it's always easier to give a lot of advice until it happens to you. And then I think sometimes you realize just how hard it is when you have a family member that is a victim of mis or disinformation. MediaWise did an animated series all about tips for like having like actual good conversations about misinformation. And I think the best way is having the conversation be the key word and finding common ground. And it can be really hard. And I understand when people don't want to have the conversation at all because it feels too difficult or hurtful. And sometimes it is good to take a step back and take some time for yourself before you enter in a conversation that is just going to be hurtful, in my opinion. But I would say finding common ground, finding something in the, like, usually a lot of disinformation is, comes from a place of fear. So if you can find like what is causing the fear and understand that, then I think you can have a more conducive conversation around it. And then I'd say asking questions like, oh, like, where did you see that? And try to direct them to some better sources, or direct them to sources that you know that they trust, is also a really good method of trying to have an actual conversation.
Nice. Has anyone else had a family member who they've had to have a conversation with in terms of spreading misinformation that they feel comfortable sharing? Because I know it's a personal question, so maybe you don't feel comfortable sharing it, but you can say hypothetically.
Yeah, the common WhatsApp group of your uncle or your mother that every day shares with you something that you say, oh my God, but I check it. And she was not paying attention to what you did. This is funny, but it happens. It's real. It happened in my family. But something that I try to say is to say, okay, as Alexa said, where did you find it? I will share with you something that is updated or something that is, but I try to not to fight, just to have a conversation, because it's very difficult to be in agreement with all the members of your family. And most of them are very anxious because they are not journalists or fact checkers, and all they are trying to understand all the information they have. But in order to reduce the anxious, say, this is not verified, wait, no, something like, and at the end of the day, you say, did you find something different? No, or something that give the, okay, it was not at the beginning of the day the same, because this you have a lot of evolution in many medias or something you said. This is the way I try to introduce something that they were talking about, and they are not sure, because most of them are like, it will happen. They have many doubts and anxious. This is the word every day they have. But and the other way, this is very sad, but it's also real. Most of people that were like in conspiracy theories, or they didn't trust about the virus, how they attack you, and when they have someone in their family or in the family they have the COVID, they say, okay, they say, okay, I don't trust in anything. I will just to say it happened. And this is the most, it's sad for me that they have to discover what is real and unreal when they have someone at home with the illness. This is very, very hard to explain, that they just to react and say, this is happening to me, no? And they changed the way they were talking about the pandemic or their attitudes about the treatment, about all the decisions, sanitary decisions. In Latin America, many people stronger believers in ivermectin. And in the region, they believe a lot in this medicine. They have a lot of deaths. There is no scientific study about it, but you know, they believe in it like they was all the day they say, we are taking care with this, but in the other way they say many people's dying, and it's a contradiction, a big contradiction. But now people is like waking up from something they believe, and this is the thing that I can share with you in my country, in the continent. It's happening all day. You know? Deaths are people reacting to another way.
Got it. Well, that we have come to the end of our time here. It is 12:30. I want to thank everyone who joined us. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us and for talking to us about this topic. Everybody else, for everyone watching right now, have a very happy International Fact Checking Day, and we'll see you at the next IFCN Talks. Thanks.